Hi, it's Nate Charles, and welcome back to the Rule of Law Brief. Today I want to talk about comedy. There's a tendency to treat comedy as lightweight, as if it's just entertainment, just jokes, just late night television, something to unwind with after the real work of politics and civic life is done. That view is historically naive. Comedy has never been about mere entertainment. It has been a structural feature of power politics. When people hear the phrase court jester, they picture a whimsical medieval European figure in a belled hat. But that image is far too narrow. The historical record shows that the jester was not just a European phenomenon, and not just a medieval one. He appears across continents: China, India, Persia, Russia, Africa, and the Americas. In fact, China has the longest and most thoroughly documented history of court jesters anywhere in the world. This is not a cultural coincidence. It was a recurring institutional role. Across civilizations, the jester shared defining traits. He was attached to a specific ruler. He stood outside the rigid political hierarchy. He entertained, yes, but more importantly, he advised, he criticized, he corrected, and he did so through humor. In societies where criticizing a ruler could cost you your life, that was not a trivial role. In medieval England, criticism of the crown could result in execution by hanging, drawing, and quartering. Yet the jester had license to mock the king. In China, the jester figure, was permitted to speak in ways that were without offense, provided criticism was delivered through jokes, songs, or performance. That method was consistent across cultures. While other court officials cooked up the king's facts, kind of like last night's State of the Union, the jester delivered them raw. That advisory function is what distinguished a jester from a mere entertainer. A juggler amuses, a musician delights, but a jester influences power. And often, he does it more effectively than formal advisors. Quintilian observed nearly 2,000 years ago that laughter may seem trivial, but it carries an imperious force that is difficult to resist and can turn the outcome of matters of great importance. This gets to a fundamental aspect of the human condition. Humor lowers defenses. It allows correction without humiliation. Instead of directly confronting a foolish idea, the jester might agree with it so enthusiastically, take it to such an absurd logical extreme, that the ruler recognizes the folly himself. That's not accidental. It is strategic communication grounded in human psychology. And this is where the deeper point emerges. Across centuries and across cultures, the persistence of the jester tells us something foundational about what it is to be human. Bad news is hard to take. Correction is hard to accept. Criticism, especially for those in power, threatens ego. It triggers defensiveness. It invites denial. That's just human. A good joke is often the sugar that helps the medicine go down. Humor lowers resistance. It bypasses the reflex to defend. It allows someone to hear something difficult without immediately rejecting it. It softens the delivery without diluting the truth. The jester survived in courts where dissent could mean death, not just because he had privilege, but because he understood psychology. A ruler might react violently to a direct accusation, but wrap that same truth in wit, in exaggeration, irony, or absurdity, and it can land without provoking the same threat response. That correction still happens. It just happens in a form the human mind can tolerate. And this truth goes beyond political rulers. We, as citizens, resist information that challenges our assumptions. We do not enjoy being confronted with our own contradictions, and we all have them. Comedy disarms that resistance. It creates just enough distance for our reflection. We laugh first, we think second, and that sequence matters. Importantly, the jester was rarely a revolutionary. He was not trying to overthrow the system. He operated as a corrective force inside it, tempting excess, puncturing arrogance, and occasionally saving the ruler from himself. He was both on the side of the ruler and on the side of the people. He could mock the king's moral halitosis while still being a cherished presence at court. At the same time, he often won favor among ordinary people as the one figure who dared to speak plainly. That dual allegiance is not weakness. It is stability. The institutional jester eventually faded in Europe and earlier in China as professional theater absorbed many of its functions, but the functions did not disappear. They just evolved. Modern political comedians occupy that same structural space. Satirists expose contradictions. They highlight hypocrisy. They identify cultural shifts before formal institutions do. And sometimes the line between comedian and political leader disappears entirely. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the current president of Ukraine, was a professional comedian before entering politics. That was not a side gig. It was his principal occupation. He was deeply engaged in political satire. His television series portrayed an ordinary teacher who unexpectedly becomes president after exposing corruption. It was fiction, but it was pointed political commentary. And then life imitated art. When Zelenskyy assumed office in real life, he brought with him the core competencies of a seasoned comedian. He understood narrative. He understood timing. He understood how to read an audience. He understood how to frame issues clearly under pressure. Comedy trains you to read the room. Leadership demands this exact same skill. The historical jester was valued because he could tell a king what others would not. The modern comedian often performs that function publicly and at scale. Authoritarian systems understand this instinctively. They tolerate flattery. They fear ridicule because ridicule destabilizes rigid narratives. A joke can puncture propaganda faster than a policy paper. Comedy is not the opposite of seriousness. It is that's built to survive. Comedy has long existed as a pressure valve in tense courts, a corrective mechanism in autocracies, a cultural early warning system in democracies. It reminds rulers that they are human. It reminds citizens that power is fallible. And it reminds all of us that truth does not always arrive wearing robes or medals. Sometimes it arrives wearing bells. And if history teaches us anything, it's this. When a society loses its tolerance for the fool, or when the fool loses the courage to speak, something essential has gone wrong. Because sometimes the wisest person in the room is the one who makes you laugh first.